A few months ago, I was driving from my friend's house at 11 p.m. I was heading down a small one-way street that is always dead after business hours. Not paying much attention because this road was a road I drove down regularly. A very thin woman with scraggly gray hair, maybe in her 50s, that I hadn't immediately noticed on the sidewalk, suddenly walked into the road in front of my car. I hadn't been driving very fast, so I stopped to let her cross the street. I wonder why she didn't wait for me to pass, as there were no cars behind me. She didn't cross all the way. She stopped in the middle of the street, then turned and walked right up to my car, put her hands on the hood, and leaned forward so she was locking eyes with me through the windshield. Her pupils were huge, her expression was angry, and she stared at me unblinkingly. She almost looked demonic. My reaction was pretty automatic. I started shaking my head and loudly repeating, "Nope, nope," to try and signal that I didn't want to interact with her. She didn't move at all, and for a split second, I wondered if she needed some kind of help, but the look in her eyes and the way she didn't say anything put me completely on edge. I threw the car in reverse and lurched away from her. She stood up straight in the middle of the road, stared at me for a second longer, then turned and nonchalantly walked back down the same side of the street she had come from. I put the car on drive and hurried past her and continued home. After the fact, I decided that this lady was probably really high on something, and maybe she didn't want to cause me any harm, but the expression in her eyes, as they bore into mine, was beyond creepy. To give a little context, I used to work in an apartment complex. As a result, I've had my fair share of creepy encounters. Most residents keep to themselves and don't cause issues, probably about 95%, but the other 5% took up almost all of my time. Isaac was one of the 5%. When he first rented his apartment, he definitely had stoner vibes, but he was nice enough and passed his background check. Almost immediately, however, he started causing issues. The lady next door complained she could smell his smoke constantly. The guy downstairs complained he could hear his stereo all hours of the day and night. Another resident accused him of following him home one night. The police were regularly called there at breaking up fights between him and his girlfriends. We caught him hiding 2 large dogs in his apartment, and he would regularly let them run loose, which ultimately resulted in another dog and 2 people being attacked. He accidentally discharged a gun in his apartment once. Needless to say, he caused a lot of problems. At first, he was very apologetic, said he would make an effort to remedy problems, but things kept getting worse, and after a year of weekly calls or notices from the office, he eventually became standoffish. One morning, I received a call from Isaac letting me know he'd broken up with one of his girls, and she wouldn't leave the apartment. He asked me to personally come up to remove her. I'm a small woman, so even if I wanted to take the risk, I physically wouldn't be capable of wrestling an angry woman out of his apartment. I suggested he called the police. He then asked if I could make a maintenance man come up to remove her. I offered to call the police on his behalf, but Isaac said he didn't want to involve them and hung up. A few hours later, Isaac came down to the office with a jump drive and said he needed to print out a 50-plus page document. Residents weren't technically allowed to use our office printer, but on rare occasions someone asked to. I usually didn't say no. But between Isaac becoming such a problem and how large this document was, I told him I couldn't print his document. I gave the excuse that our paper or toner was monitored and we would get in trouble for printing such a large document. Not liking my answer, he started screaming about how it was bullshit. He accused me of being useless, bringing up my refusal to fight his ex, and power tripping. He called me a fucking bitch multiple times and said someone needed to bring me down a peg. I was pretty over him at this point and told him that if he wasn't going to behave like a child that he needed to leave. He told me I couldn't make him. Bluntly, I told him he would leave or I would call the police and have him removed. I also told him I would ban him from the office going forward. Normally, I tried to kill the residents with kindness, but his lease was ending in a week and I didn't care anymore if he hated me. My threat had seemed to work. He angrily knocked my pen holder over, then slammed both doors hard as he left. The following morning, a cop was waiting for me when I got to work. He asked me if Isaac was a resident, and I confirmed that he was. The officer explained that the body of a teen had been discovered the day before, and Isaac was a prime suspect. He was the last person to text a kid, asking him to meet where his body was found shortly after the message. The police believed Isaac had been paid to kill him, based on the timing of the text and when the boy was discovered. Isaac would have had to left my office and gone directly there to kill him. Ultimately, the police wanted to use Isaac's move-out date as an opportunity to try and get him. To nobody's surprise, he did not show up. When I walked through his apartment for damage, I found a bank receipt from the day of the murder. Someone has wired him $17,000. I thankfully never saw Isaac again. He was caught in another country a few months later and is now in prison. I don't live in the USA, but I was born there and visit once a year. This incident occurred, I would say, maybe 2 to 3 years ago. I visited my cousins in Houston, and it's my first day there. I'm in the guest room drawing and listening to music where I hear very faint knocks at the corner of my room. My cousins jokingly said that they think a man lives in the attic, but I brushed it off because my cousins are always very mischievous. As time went on very slowly, the knocks grew closer, and I noticed it only when it covered half the distance between me. There was a pause, and at this moment I had stopped everything. Then the knocks came at me full speed. It was like those passive-aggressive knocks coming towards me. I got up and got out of the room. Weird walls in America, I guess. Distinctly remember thinking, this was my first encounter, first of many. Over the days I had started sleeping in the same room as my cousin, as it was much more fun. However, one night we were relaxing in the same guest room. I heard the knocks. We were making jokes and then we noticed the time was really late, 3 or 4 in the morning. We all decided to pull an all-nighter. Then we heard a loud bang. Imagine slamming a door as hard as you possibly can, and that's exactly what we heard. We are all weirded out because the only people in the house were me, my 2 cousins, my sister, and another cousin upstairs in their room, and my cousin's parents who were sound asleep. No one was downstairs, and if they were, why would they slam the door? We all go outside our room and are trying to spook each other out until we hear something on all 4s running up the marble stairs towards us. We all book it into my cousin's room and lock the door. We hear something run past the room door, and that's it. We all slept eventually. We asked my sister and other cousin if it was them, but they said they didn't hear a thing. My cousin's parents said they didn't hear any banging of any door. My cousins have now moved out of that house, but this memory was always a mystery to me. Any explanations? What do you guys think? Earlier this week, I was walking my dogs at 11 p.m. while home alone. I saw a deer cross the road at the exit of my neighborhood and started walking towards it. I saw an SUV come down the road and stopped to look at the deer on the side of the road, but it was very strange because he turned around to go back the way he came, and he was staring at me from his car, partially hanging out of his window. I did not make eye contact, walked away so I didn't get the best identifying descriptions. As the car was leaving, he made 2 U-turns and was shining his lights at the deer. I did not stop watching his car. I only really saw the back of it, because I thought he was going to get out and kill the deer right in front of me. He then drove down the road further, but would keep stopping every few feet. I kept watching and did not turn my back, because I had feelings he was watching me while he was stopping, because at this point I think the deer had ran off. I thought this was a really weird occurrence and started walking straight home once his taillights disappeared to tell my family what had just happened. As I was approaching my house, I noticed the same car had now come into my neighborhood and went down the road past my house. I had a really bad gut feeling already, and this threw me into a full-blown panic. I ran inside, locked the doors, and called my husband while watching out the window behind the curtain. Probably 10 minutes passed, 11:30 p.m. at this point, and my neighbor came home. As soon as their car pulled into the driveway across from mine, I saw that same car leave very quickly. It seemed like he was maybe waiting or stalking down the road. My husband told me to call the police. When I called the police, I told them I thought it was a Chevy, but all I knew is that it was an older SUV, and they sent out a patrol. While I was waiting, I saw what I believed was the same white SUV fly down the road past my house once more. The police came through the neighborhood with their lights on, and as soon as the cop got near my house, the same SUV drove away. However, that second occurrence was a Ford SUV, but the cop told me he saw a man fitting the description I'd given. So we went after him, and I have never heard or seen anything since. I've been really shaken up and didn't even go outside yesterday. Luckily, I have 2 cops who live in my neighborhood, but still a scary thought of what could have happened. Thank you guys for watching and listening to the end. Please be sure to subscribe for future content and like the video as it helps it perform at a much higher level. If you want your story featured on an upcoming video, email me at the email in the description box below. And until we meet again, stay sinful.
22 years ago, I lived in a house on a lake. I rented a room from a lady that lived in the other room. I had been living with a good friend but moved out and needed a new place. My parents actually found the listing in the newspaper and set me up with it. So, aside from a strange living condition of living in a 2-bedroom bungalow with a complete stranger in the middle of nowhere, it seemed like it was actually going to be pretty nice. My new housemate had a large dog that actually kind of freaked me out a bit. However, she ended up being a super sweet dog. My housemate was never home too. Between work, her friends, and her boyfriend, I saw her like all of 3 days out of 3 months that I lived at the house. So, in the end, I practically took care of the dog. The thing about this dog, though, is that she would hide under my housemate's bed until she was hungry or needed to go outside. And never having had dogs, I didn't really know any better. The first month wasn't anything to write home about. I got some awesome photos of the moon over the lake. Somewhere in this time frame, I started recognizing the facts above. I also started getting a weird vibe in the house, I guess. In fact, if I wasn't in my room, I wanted to be in there pretty much only. I also only felt safe during the day. I use that term because the feeling at night was the same as if you think something bad is about to happen. The problem is that you just couldn't quantify it. But at some point, I started hearing knocking noises randomly in the ceiling near the kitchen. I figured that it was just birds because there's a lot around. One afternoon, though, I decided to check out the attic crawl space located above the kitchen cabinets. It was a wooden door with a single lock or latch on it, and a fixed handle. I'd eaten lunch and climbed up there to check it out, opened the door, and didn't feel threatened or anything. I peeked my head in and looked left and right over the bedrooms. Basic attic, nothing special. I closed the door and climbed down. But from that moment on, something definitely changed. The dog came out of the kitchen and just sort of stared at me, like didn't even move, not an inch. It honestly made me very uneasy. I tried the tricks of outside, treat, play, but she just didn't move. So, in the end, I just sort of went to my room and shut the door. In the weeks that followed, the events became more and more unnerving as well. I began to stop being able to sleep. I turned to leaving music on overnight. Very low volume, but it was on nevertheless. As time passed, I got to where I felt like someone was standing in the corner of my room. One evening, the alarm or clock radio in the living room, it also turned on by itself. At first, I didn't even know it was there, to be honest, because I never went in there. Nothing in there was mine. Next, over the last 2 months, it had never gone off. But I asked my housemate, when I saw her next, about that, and she denied setting it. She was also visibly confused as to why it would go off like that. But I began to feel as though I was being watched in every room. I felt as though the thing in my room was always there. I began to wake from sleep for no reason. I began grinding my teeth at night as well. I moved to sleeping with a black light on, the lowest light level that I could get in the room. Music became CDs that would repeat indefinitely, and now I would wake up, look around, and see nothing and then try to go back to sleep. My housemate and a friend were at the house one evening too, and the friend claimed to be a psychic, and she looked dead at me and asked me how I was sleeping. I hadn't seen the housemate in weeks and hadn't told her about my problems. She then tells me that there's apparently an old man in my room and that he doesn't like me. I asked if there was anything that I could do, and she said no. I began addressing this man, though, trying to fix things in a desperate attempt to get more sleep and asking him to leave me alone, but life got much worse. I would be on the phone with my now wife and would fall asleep, and she would tell me years later that there were really strange sounds that scared her. She said that she would stay on the phone to ensure that nothing happened to me. I began to have regular nightmares every time that I closed my eyes. My work started to suffer. I was exhausted. It was around this time too that I began to see a dark cloud like mist that appeared to pour out of the cinder wall, with the lights on, mind you, in the corner of the room the man had been reported standing in. I would walk over and touch the area, but there was never anything there. I would go back to bed and see it still happening. My wife was getting ready one morning, and while putting on makeup, she also said that she told me that the face just wasn't hers. She left the bathroom and she never went back in. That night, we were both asleep. She had become accustomed to my nightmares at this point. I had a dream that she and I were in my car driving down the road. It was nice. I look at her and then back at the road in time to see 3 children in the road. The next sequence happened so fast, I had no time to react. Each hit the windshield and sort of appeared zombie-like. I immediately awoke, obviously. I was sweating, shaking, and scared. My wife was instantly awake also. She asked what happened, and I relayed the story above, and her face lost color. She looked very concerned. Thinking it was the content of the dream, I apologized, but she sat silent, long enough to make me wonder if something was wrong with me. She eventually broke the silence and said that just before you woke me, I dreamed that we had just gotten into your car. We left, and the next day I found somewhere else to stay. We moved to another state, and the first night in the new place, I slept non-stop, perfectly. I woke up rested and recognized like the silence in my head, if that makes sense. And after getting out, I'm more convinced than ever that there is something going on with that house at the lake. So I'll start off by saying that I've always been open-minded. So has my friend and her partner. We've all had our little strange or odd encounters over the years, and sometimes came up with the logical explanation or left it to the unknown, I guess. But we have never had something like this happen before. Well, the car part anyway. So, this happened a couple of hours ago. Me and my friend and her partner were downstairs about to watch a film. Their young son, 4 years old, was upstairs fast asleep. The stairs are in the front room where we were sat, and their 4-week-old daughter was in the Moses basket by the sofa. We had turned off the lights, shut the curtains, and got comfortable. There was a small bang upstairs, so my friend's partner went to check their son. All fine. But as the partner walked down the stairs, he heard almost like a wind chime jingle from their bedroom and said out loud like, "Huh, that's weird," but put it down to a possible draft somewhere or something. Not even 5 minutes later, we get comfy, go to watch the film, and me and my friend notice car lights outside, rather bright, so we take a peek. It's their car, full beams on, for about 10 to 15 seconds and then off again. And we all looked at each other dumbfounded. Then again, a bit longer this time. Then the indicators flashed a few times, then stopped. And as it stopped, their son screamed, like not even a second passed, and he started screaming and crying, to the point that he was so wound up that he was nearly sick. Of course, as soon as he screamed, the dad ran straight up, as my best friend was breastfeeding. The dad brought him down, and he was inconsolable. And being only 4, he couldn't exactly say much, just sort of some broken words. Then the TV went off with no warning. Then a bang upstairs, and then silence. We spoke for a good hour or so, trying to decipher what the heck just happened, but the car keys were in the other room, nowhere near any living animal or human. When we approached the car, me and my friend's partner, we checked if it was locked, and it was. We looked in the car manual and had a Google search, and nothing comes up regarding the full beams just staying on and then intermittent hazard lights going off. There was no alarm as well, which was really strange, and definitely nobody around. But since then, their son won't settle. Their little girl keeps waking randomly and crying, and they've heard a couple of more bangs. I've never experienced car lights being set on or off like that before. Usually an electrical fault would happen when the vehicle is on, or you would have a warning light, but nothing. It's a newish car as well, so quite full of tech, and to be honest, it's been checked out and there doesn't seem to be anything wrong. I have had a few experiences myself, but usually with lights in the home, candles, noises, etc., but nothing to this level. Also, the first feeling that I had was sickness and dread. I've not had gut feelings like this regarding the paranormal for many years now, but I genuinely felt unwelcome, and I dare say almost watched too. When I was in my early days of my career and joined an internship in a small town, a few of us were housed by the company that we worked for in a modified apartment. They basically had joined 2 apartments together, so there were 3 bedrooms and a bathroom on each side, with a really, really long corridor in between. Now, towards the end of the assignment, we had a group presentation, so the bunch of us living on our side, we worked on the presentation together, decided to head very early into the office and practice. As per our plans made the previous evening, me and this girl called Simna woke up first around 4:30, so we could use the 2 bathrooms each and get ready. I didn't mind using the bathroom at the other end of the corridor, so I collected my toiletries and headed that way. Simna was doing the same on our side, and we didn't really talk as it was way too early and others were also sleeping. The 2 bedrooms on the other side were empty, and one was closed. I assumed that they were sleeping. I set my stuff on the counter and realized quickly that I forgot my bath towel, so came out of the bathroom and saw Simna standing in the middle of the darkened corridor with her back to me. I sort of halted immediately because something seemed very off with the way that she was standing. The hair on my arms was raised up and warning bells went off in my head. I must have made some sound though, because this person turned their head around to look at me. It looked exactly like her, but she was smiling broadly at me, like really smirking. I quickly said, "Hey, what's going on?" to her, but at the same time sort of backed up into the bathroom where there was light, and hot water to use as a weapon, I suppose. I didn't dare come out, and I started praying. After around 20 to 25 minutes of time had passed, I heard knocking on the bathroom door and my roommate's, not Simna, voice asking me if I was done. I didn't say anything to her. I couldn't understand it myself, but as I walked down the corridor to my room, I saw Simna getting ready in her room. I went to her and was like, "What the heck, dude? You scared me." And she did not know what I was talking about. I did not know this girl very well, but she was not a prankster from what I could tell. Also, it was too early in the morning and we were too geared up about the presentation for her to do something like that and to pretend like nothing happened. Till the end of that internship, she maintained that it wasn't her that scared me that morning. To this day, I cannot explain what or who I saw that morning. So my house was built in the 70s. Not particularly new, but not really that old, I guess, too. We moved here in the early 2000s. I don't really know any of the history behind it, but we've always joked that there are ghosts here. Doors slamming, creaking, and things randomly disappearing has always been blamed on ghosts, but around 5 years ago, it started becoming a tad more aggressive, you could say. The sounds of light footsteps in the hallway, scratches from the second floor and inside the wall. Mind you, we have no rodent problems, so it seemed sort of unexplainable to the entire family. Then, one day, around 3 to 4 years ago, I was home alone sitting in the living room when a loud bang appeared from the second floor. It was so loud I was worried that the upstairs cabinet had fallen over on the floor or something. When the bang hit, my lights flickered too and the TV turned off and on. I could feel the shake all the way down the stairs. I went up to check what happened, obviously, and when I did, everything seemed the same. This has happened several times now, and it's almost entirely identical. A loud bang, a shake, flickering lights, but nothing ever seems out of place. What makes this worse, too, is that you can't hear it when you're upstairs. You can only hear it when you're downstairs. I know that sounds weird, but that's what happens. I've been called on my phone to stop slamming the door so hard when I'm laying silently in my bed and stuff like that, and I haven't heard a thing. In the past year, I've also started seeing things. I might just have imagined things, but at one point I could have swore that I saw a toddler sleeping in my brother's bed. I saw her pretty clearly too. She was young, maybe 3 years. She had long blonde hair and her arm hung over the edge of the bed. When I approached her, she just disappeared. This was probably a year ago, but it still really confuses and spooks me. Then, a few weeks ago, I encountered her again. I was home alone when someone knocked on the door. I was a bit confused as I wasn't expecting anyone. As I approached the hallway, I heard the door closing and I heard a young girl saying, "Hello," like she had just come home and was announcing her being there. I felt chills run down my back, but I still opened the door to look. My brother is 5, and I figured that he might have just come home early or something, but no one was there. Today, I closed the door, like properly shut, and then it just opened a bit again. And when I looked at the open door, it shut again, quickly closed. And now I keep hearing banging sounds from downstairs, and I just don't know what to do. I'm like unironically kind of worried. Also, I don't know if this matters, but the dreams that I get in this house are always so vivid compared to when I'm not at home. Sometimes I wake up with the sheets off my bed and blanket as well because I sleep so uneasy, I guess. Anyways, I could really do with some advice. I don't think speaking to whatever this is works. I tried, and I guess maybe things stopped being so noisy for a bit, but then it would just start up again, and that's been a bit of a theme for this whole thing. So yeah, if you have any advice, then please do let me know. Me, my best friend, her girlfriend, and my boyfriend were walking home from dinner and stopped at a 7-Eleven. My boyfriend wanted a couple of beers. We waited outside while he got what he needed. As we were outside, I noticed a girl with a backpack walking around the parking lot. She walked up to another girl who was on her phone, and girl number 2 said to whoever she was talking to, "Yeah, my homegirl here, 1 second," and proceeded to tell girl 1 to go and sit in a car occupied by a large white male while she went inside. I noticed the male and the girl number 1 kept looking at us from the car while girl number 2 stayed on the phone inside. I specifically noticed that the male said something and pointed, and girl number 1 laughed while looking at us. Here's where it gets sketchy too. Girl number 1 gets out of the car and comes up to my friend and asks her if she has a pen and a paper. She told her that she has a pen but no paper, and we didn't have any either. And here's how the conversation went after she received the pen. Girl number 1 said, "Where do you live? The trailer park behind here?" No, but nearby." Girl number 1 said, "Oh, okay, well, my grandmother lives there. Where do you work?" My friend said the name of a work girl, and she said, "Oh, really? I know that place. My sister used to work there. What's your name again? You look familiar." My friend tells her name. She says, "Oh, yeah, I think I know you. I knew you looked familiar." My friend has never seen her before, mind you. The girl says, "So how far until you're home?" At this point, my boyfriend came out of the store. The moment that he did, the girl instantaneously wrapped up the conversation and quickly retreated back to the car, saying, "Well, thanks for the pen," not even returning it. Nor did she write anything the entire time. She also kept trying to touch my friend. I did notice that, specifically at her wrists. The girl also had a hospital band on and was saying that she had depression or something. I noticed the man watching the entire interaction and said something to the girl the minute that she opened the car door. He seemed sort of frustrated with her, maybe. But they watched us until we walked off, maybe a minute or 2 later. They proceeded to sit in the car for at least 3 minutes. At least that's how long it took until they were out of my sight. Probably longer since they made no effort to pull off. But the whole thing just seemed, I don't know, really sketchy and weird. Has anyone heard of anything like this before? I'm especially worried as my friend doesn't have a car and walks everywhere, so there's a good chance that she may be back there at some point. Should we be worried? So I was a security guard for this local company in my area. I was assigned to a water park with another guard who was regularly there keeping watch. He was to train me and show me around and tell me what codes open what doors, stuff like that. But I first noticed how quick he was to enter and leave the property, that he never wanted to spend more than like 10 minutes inside the property before he would be eager to leave. Our first night was simple. There was nothing exciting or interesting going on, so our night dragged a bit. After a few hours, I asked him if he'd experienced anything unusual while working here. He told me that he's had some problems with people trying to enter the property without permission, but that's about it. He also told me that he hated working there because of his encounters with these people. He said that they creeped him out because of just how sneaky they were. He didn't really want to tell me much because he was afraid that I would leave the post. That should have been a red flag for me, but I was too excited to let anything like that scare me. A few more hours later and our shift is over, so we check out and go home for the day. The next night, my boss calls me to explain that the security guard, my partner, had resigned. I must admit that I was a little bit upset about that because now I have to work a 2-man post all by myself with barely any knowledge on the place. Anyway, fast forward a few weeks, I started to get the hang of things and created my own routine with no issues at all. There were no break-ins, no vandalism, nothing. It's now 2 a.m. and I was outside at the front of the property completing my rounds when I heard a door slam from inside. I jumped because of how loud it was, and as I started to walk back into the property, I continued to hear doors opening and closing. I could feel myself getting nervous because it was my first situation that I've ever had at this place. As I walk inside and started to check the doors and complete a round to make sure that there was no one on the property, I get to this corridor where there was a set of stairs that led down to a door that was wide open. I gingerly walked down the stairs to close and lock the door because I was too scared to take a look inside. But as I turned around to head back up the stairs, I noticed a man dressed in all black standing at the top of the stairs. I take a step back and realize that I'm cornered, and if he was to try anything, I would have nowhere to run or hide. So I politely asked him if he needed any help, and he didn't reply. I then asked him how he got into the property. He still didn't reply. He slowly turned his head and snapped his fingers, and then from the left side of the staircase, another man slowly crawled to his side like a dog on all fours. And at that, I turned around and kicked the door open and ran inside and locked myself in a bathroom. I did this as I called my boss and told him what I'd witnessed. They sent an armed security guard to my position to complete a walkthrough to make sure that I was safe. As I got the call that the area was clear, I came out and told them everything from start to finish. I realized that they didn't believe me, so I clocked out and went home for the night. The next morning, I received a call from my boss explaining that they had checked the security footage from the night before, and what they told me horrified me. Every hour when I would complete my rounds inside the property, those same two men would follow me through the facility as if they were stalking me, like as if it was a game to them. After that, I asked for a new position because I was too horrified to work at that water park. I now know why my trainer didn't want to work there anymore too. And this actually happened to me. I have more creepy stories like this from when I was working security, so if you want to hear them, I'd be happy to share them, but thanks for listening, and it's good to finally get this off my chest. This happened a few years ago when I was just days shy of my 30th birthday. I was returning to the office in the middle of the afternoon after a not-so-quick trip to the DMV to renew my driver's license. At the time, I worked for a major corporation that was headquartered in downtown. The company has several parking garages, but unless you're a director or above at the company, you have to park several blocks from the headquarters. So, I had just left one of our parking garages about a block and a half away from my office when I heard someone begin walking behind me. Now, mind you, this is a major city with a bustling downtown, so obviously nothing out of the ordinary there. I assumed it was just, most likely, a fellow employee. That is, until I glanced at the ground behind me. This employee was wearing athletic socks tucked into slip-on Adidas sandals, so definitely not an employee of a Fortune 10 returning to the office or anything. I picked up my pace, and so did he. We had recently had several violent attacks on our employees by homeless people, so my company had stationed dozens of police officers and security guards around our campus as a precaution. I quickly made my way across the crosswalk to the courtyard, where they'd all congregated, hoping to catch their attention as this person behind me closed in on me. But not a single one took notice. They were just completely oblivious. So the person behind me followed me into the building. At this point, I'm not too nervous. If his intention was to mug me, he'd have to be really stupid doing so while surrounded by police and security guards in a corporate headquarters building. But we have a Starbucks in our lobby that's always packed in mid-afternoon, so knowing that he'd have no opportunity to make a move on me with so many people around, I made my way into the coffee line. I finally mustered the courage to turn around, and when I did, he was gone. There, see? I told myself. Just wanted to make off with my bag, and now he's gone. After 15 minutes of waiting on my coffee, I began making my way back out of the Starbucks. But there's this tiny little nook too that's out of eyeshot of the waiting line, and as I passed it, I saw a pair of socks tucked into Adidas sandals, and when I walked out, he resumed his pursuit. That was the moment that my blood ran cold as well. He wasn't looking for just any target. He'd chosen me. He was determined to finish the job. About 20 feet ahead of me was our security desk. On either side of the security desk are sets of 3 security turnstiles, which only open with an employee badge or when opened by a security guard. Once again, I tried desperately to make eye contact with the security guard. She was on another planet though. And I basically sprinted through the turnstile, and once I'd made it safely to the other side, I turned around to face my pursuer. He was a kid, no older than 17 or 18, Hispanic with a fade haircut. He had a small tattoo above his left eyebrow, a sleeve of tattoos upon his right arm, black pants and a baggy red t-shirt. Despite everyone around, he stood his ground at the turnstile, and then he pushed on the glass gates, and pushed again. I shot a look at the security, and she was still clueless, but it was the metamorphosis of facial expressions on the kid's face that scared me the most. At first, it was blank. Is he on drugs? I asked myself. But it was quickly replaced by something else. It was fear. He looked genuinely terrified, like he didn't succeed in getting to me. Something bad was going to happen to him for sure. He pushed on the gate once more. His look of terror evolved into a look of sheer determination. I walked behind the wall separating our elevator banks from our security desk and walked to the other set of turnstiles, where I noticed an unoccupied security guard. On the other side, the kid mirrored my movements though. "Ma'am," I told the guard, "this kid just followed me from the parking garage, into headquarters, into and out of Starbucks, and just attempted not once, not twice, but 3 times to force open the turnstiles. And no one noticed." At this point, I was shaking with fear, so she assured me that she'd notify officers to force him out of the building. When I went upstairs and told a colleague what had happened, she told me that I'd need to file a report with our company's asset protection. I think ex-military, security, police, those types. So I did. And a few hours later, I got a call from one of the higher-ups in asset protection, a former Secret Service member and the guy who provides personal security to our CEO. He insisted on walking me to my car that evening too. The following day, around the same time of the afternoon the kid followed me the day before, I got a text from my new friend in the asset protection, and it was a photo of the kid. It read, "Is this your guy?" And I said, "Yeah, where is he?" He said, "Sitting right outside the entrance of the headquarters. He's 18 years old and has several gang tattoos." He asked, "When he followed you, did he say anything? Any catcalling, chirps, anything of the sort?" I said, "No, he just followed me. He never said a thing. Why? Is that bad?" He asked me to call him, so I did. I learned what gang he was based in on the tattoos, which I won't reveal here for safety reasons. I learned I was clearly targeted and that the fact that he said nothing to me implied that his intent, whatever it was clearly very bad. He then asked to have me to put my manager on the phone and told both of us that I needed to stay away from the headquarters for at least a few weeks until they deemed the situation safe again. So, for the next 3 weeks, I worked out of my stepdad's office. But because we didn't know if the gang kid had targeted me at the DMV or after I had already parked downtown, we also didn't know how much he knew about me. So I was told to stay at my parents' house until it was safe to return. My husband and I had just moved into our new house, by the way. But what gets really interesting is that my stepdad happens to be in intelligence as well. And after he and his colleagues did some digging, it turns out that this particular gang had recently gotten heavily involved in human trafficking of all things. I asked one of my stepdad's colleagues why they targeted me. Weren't younger girls usually a target? Granted, I did look quite a bit younger than 30. He then told me that the price for someone my age could be sold for, and I felt sick. After 3 weeks, the kid finally disappeared, but not without some intimidating persuasion. He apparently showed up once more during my absence. We learned that he occasionally rode with his dad to go pick up his little brother at the charter school down the road. His dad would go inside the school for 20 or 30 minutes every day, so they think the kid had someone nearby assigning him tasks, or whatever the terminology is. I'm clearly very unfamiliar with that world. But on that day, 3 weeks before, I was that task. So one day, my stepdad's colleague, also ex-Secret Service, sat on a bench waiting for him to show up. When the kid's dad went into the school, my stepdad's colleague, who's 6'7", stood up, walked straight up to the passenger window where the kid was sitting, smiled, took out his phone and snapped a photo of the kid's face before walking away. Apparently, the kid lost it, asking, "Who are you? Why did you do that, man?" and stuff like this. The kid never came back after that day. It was easily the scariest 3 weeks of my life, not knowing if this gang member had simply developed a very aggressive crush on me or if his intentions were much, much more sinister. The one good thing that came out of it all, though, is that asset protection moved me into the director and above parking garage, which had an underground entrance to our office. Which means that I never had to walk those crazy downtown streets alone ever again after that.